hands down, Young Love is the most terrible episode of the Doris Day show so far. This is the 26th and final episode of the third season. This is directed by Norman Tokar, and it's just abysmal. Doris is in it for about 2 minutes, maybe maximum. The rest of it is following her niece, a character called April, and I really disliked April even before I realised it was very much the April show. There was just something about her that I did not like, and then when I realised the whole thing was following her story, it was just an absolutely awful experience. April arrives at Doris's doorstep in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she needs some advice. And then we hear her story and what led her to being there, and it's really boring, really dull. She's a very unlikable character. None of the other characters are necessarily unlikable, but they were mostly very boring. And as I said, we get a tiny bit of Doris. We cut back to Doris and April maybe 2 or 3 times for no more than a minute at a time. And then the rest of it is this story told with a flashback, and it's just boring. It is terrible. It's not the Doris Day show, this episode, and it's a really unfortunate way to end the third season. There is nothing positive about this because our protagonist is, in my opinion, very unlikable. Her story was very boring, and we get a minuscule amount of Doris. So I don't have anything else to say. I thought it was a really terrible decision, a really appalling decision. And unfortunately, this episode marks, in fact, the previous episodes marked a lot of finals as well. So I have nothing else to say about this episode. I detested it. I never want to watch it again. But I do have some things to say about what's coming up. I didn't realize that some of the previous episodes were the final appearances of a lot of characters. And when I realised this, I was looking at Wikipedia to kind of see what was coming up, because I knew one thing about the cast, but that's it. And I will now share some of this information. Basically, I'm just wanting to have a bit of a grumble about this because I'm not predicting great things, and I feel like this episode is a bit of a prelude to that, because this one does deal with more adult themes than pretty much every other episode. And according to Wikipedia, Season 3 is the end of quite a few things, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And Wikipedia, at least, suggests that the reason we have this shift from Season 4 is that apparently CBS were cancelling a lot of their rural-based and family programs, to quote Wikipedia. And if that doesn't sum up the Doris Day show so far, I don't know what does. And they were replacing them with more, and I quote, urban, adult-oriented programs. This episode definitely fits that a lot more. So I am slightly nervous that I'm not going to enjoy a lot of the show going forward. One of the main reasons why I love this show, aside from Doris Day, is because it is very sweet and heartwarming, and I like that family and rural-based atmosphere. That's not to say I didn't like it when she moved to the city, but definitely it's not as strong as it was in the earlier seasons. And I will go in with an open mind when I watch the next season, but based purely on this one, if this is an example of the kind of things to come, I don't think I'm going to enjoy it. Not that I don't like, or I'm not interested in the topic that was explored here, but if this is an indication of the kind of storytelling, I'm not hopeful. But I love Doris Day beyond words, so of course I will watch it regardless. But we'll see. I feel like it was a bad decision. But maybe the ratings were dropping. I don't know. Maybe the ratings were going down, and that's one of the reasons why they decided to have the shift. We'll see. However, we do have some significant cast changes, and obviously I can't comment on the new cast. I haven't seen them yet. I will find out in due course. But we say goodbye to everybody. According to Wikipedia, at the very least, that's it. Everybody's gone. No more Billy and Toby. Apparently they're never ever mentioned again. So it is kind of like we're just wiping the slate clean, and this is almost a different character. And according, again, to Wikipedia, I must stress this is my only source for this so far, but Doris drops the Mrs. We know that she's a widow, and she becomes Miss. She's still working for Today's World, but we don't have Mr. Nicholson. We don't have Ron Harvey. We don't have Myrna, which I am devastated about. Absolutely devastated. We've seen the last of Buck. We've seen the last of Nelson. That's heartbreaking. Why get rid of the dog? We've seen the last of Leroy, but I kind of figured that might have been the case. And we do apparently see the Palucci's occasionally make sense if they're her landlord, landlady, and we do actually see Mr. Jarvis, which is great. Having a couple of those characters there will hopefully help it to feel a little bit like the same show. But I still am deeply, deeply heartbroken by that. I can't believe just no more Toby and Billy. It just doesn't make any sense why they'd get rid of her children. And not having any Buck. Buck was such a brilliant character, and I don't understand it. So it could be an amazing season 4, could be an amazing season 5, but it's definitely, I've just seen something I'll share in a moment, but it feels like it's a completely different show. And maybe I need to treat it that way. Maybe I need to think of it not as season 4 of the Doris Day Show, but season 1 of the new Doris Day Show. We'll see. The reason I started laughing there is because, again, Wikipedia, I've got the page up in front of me. I will quote this for you. Day placed a one-page statement in Variety saying, more or less, and I quote, television is not the be-all, end-all. This was about the fact that Doris actually apparently chose to not renew her contract for the show. But just the fact there that I'm going on and on and on about this, and then I see a quote from Doris Day saying the television is not the be-all, end-all. I disagree. I'm deeply passionate. I love this show. But I'm nervous about the direction it's going to take. But also curious. I am looking forward to watching the next episode. But very apprehensive as well. And with all of that rambling out of the way, I will sum up by saying Young Love is one of the worst things I have ever seen. It does not belong in this show. Certainly it does not belong in season 3. I'm devastated that they didn't at least make the effort to include Myrna and Ron Harvey and Mr. Nicholson and the kids in this episode and giving them a great send-off. Maybe at this time they didn't know, but I find that hard to believe based on this final episode. Young Love is terrible. Nothing will stop my love of Doris Day. But whether or not I continue to praise the Doris Day Show itself so highly, time will tell.